Now look where you're at. You're wearing a visitor's pass at police headquarters. So I think you should clean it up. I think you should be begging me for answers and trying to figure out how to make this thing right, how to help. That's where we need to start.
I want you to elaborate on it. So do you essentially just want me to admit to everything?
I want you to communicate with me and explain to me how something like that could happen.
I never sexually assaulted her.
After spending 5 nights and 6 days in jail, I was finally released on October 8th, 2013, but this case was far from over. At the bond hearing, the Commonwealth's attorney did not resist my bail, and also Detective DeCoster was not present. Even though in practice and in theory, the detective and the Commonwealth's attorney was supposed to do a lot more to resist the defendant's bail. Does the detective's absence reflect anything? Who knows? Anyway, as you've seen in part 1, my ex-girlfriend had just falsely accused me, and I was charged with 2 heinous crimes: rape and abduction with intent to defile. She and Hassan have both made statements in an effort to put together a story to make it seem like I raped her at some point in time, but their timelines and stories don't quite match. We'll look at the details in a bit. Detective DeCoster also interviewed me and called me twice before my arrest in a persistent effort to get me to confess to a crime that I did not commit. I met with my lawyer on Friday, October 11th at around 1 p.m., 3 days after making bail. Even without full details of the complainant's case, I began to gather information that would prove that no sexual assault of any kind occurred between the dates of March 1st to June 1st of 2012. It was frustrating to me because, as explained to me by prison staff and others, there's generally a precise date on a warrant. Since the complainant used such a broad time frame, it was now my burden, my responsibility, to prove that nothing happened between the dates of March 1st and June 1st of 2012. To this day, it perplexes me that all Hassan and the complainant had to do was just say to the police that the crime happened at some point in time, without really having to corroborate anything. Not to mention that their timelines deviate from each other by over a year. In the interim suspension letter that Dean Grove sent to me while I was in jail, it clearly stated that I had a right to ask for a hearing to appeal the suspension. While I was preparing for Zheng versus Commonwealth, I was also in the middle of talks to get reinstated at UVA as a student. Because there was no telling how long this could last for, I just wanted to be back at school and not get too far behind on my studies. Because the trial process in general is a very lengthy process. It could take anywhere from 3 months to a year before this thing even goes to trial. I immediately asked for a hearing at the University of Virginia to be heard by 3 UVA administrators: Alan Groves, Patricia Lampkin, and Susan Davis. During the hearing, I provided evidence to prove that 1, I'm innocent, 2, to prove that I was not a danger to anyone on campus. At the end of the hearing, in their words, they refused to make a decision at the time whether or not they should reinstate me as a student because they said that they wanted to wait for more information to come out from the case. They insisted that the prosecution must have something substantial against me. The UVA administrators asked me, who would make a false accusation? Why would anyone do that? And how could the detective be so incompetent? Dean of Students Alan Groves did tell me that the Commonwealth would only charge me if they had a substantial case against me. The 3 administrators also heavily implied that I was not honest about the case with them. They insisted that the prosecution must have something substantial against me. Their issue with me was that they think I might be a danger on campus, even though a judge already made a determination that I was allowed to be on the streets and that I was allowed to be out of jail during the duration of this case and be a part of society. Also, the person who accused me doesn't even go to UVA. The UVA administration is emphasizing that I might be a danger, but they certainly are not in a position to prove that. During this time, I gathered everything I had. The discovery phase of Zheng versus Commonwealth had not yet occurred, and this is when essentially the prosecution and defense exchanged information of what they had for their cases. At this point, we still didn't know the details of my ex-girlfriend's accusation, and we didn't even know who the supposed witness was. Discovery finally happened on November 12th, 2013, 3 days before the preliminary hearing. This was when we received copies of all the videos. We had the video of DeCoster interviewing me. We had the video of DeCoster interviewing the complainant. We had a telephone recording of the telephone sting, and we had a telephone recording of DeCoster interviewing Hassan. We received a copy of the incident report put together by Detective DeCoster, despite the fact that my lawyers and I received a lot of information from the Commonwealth's attorney, but it also did seem like we were not in possession of every single file in the prosecution's case. It appears that Detective DeCoster talked to my ex-girlfriend at least a few more times because certain details in her story began to change. According to the incident report, she said that we never dated and that I was a stalker who had an unnatural attraction to her. She emphasized that there was no romantic relationship whatsoever, and she even went as far as saying that we weren't even friends. I immediately began analyzing this information with my lawyers And now, I know what to do in order to demonstrate my innocence in this case. There are many ways to puncture the narrative prepared by the detective, by my ex-girlfriend, by Hassan. So what was critical was emphasizing that her broad time frame does not make sense, especially considering the reality of my relationship with my ex-girlfriend. And also we had to prove generally where I was every day from March 1st to June 1st of 2012. I'll show just a sample, a portion of our case that we prepared for the preliminary hearing. Over 40,000 text messages and tens of thousands of other messages in the forms of various social media such as Gmail, Skype, Facebook exist to substantiate that I did indeed have a romantic relationship with my ex-girlfriend. Despite the complex feelings that genuine victims of sexual assault do have, it is odd that my ex-girlfriend would talk to me like this, especially after denying that there was a romantic relationship. Why would she talk to me like this before, during, and after the March 1st to June 1st timeframe? In the ocean of information, there is no reference or implication of any sort of sexual misconduct. There is no, why did you do that to me? I am scared of you. Stop bothering me. Stop stalking me. There are no messages like that. The ocean of social media messages generally give a good idea of where I am and where my ex-girlfriend is. And there is no implication that I brought her home after school and forced her to have sex with me, or brought her anywhere else for that matter and forced her to have sex with me. Since my ex-girlfriend denies a romantic relationship and denies that we were even friends, anyone that saw us together or saw us on a date would become potential witnesses in support of my case. My ex-girlfriend insists that we never had consensual sex or had a physical relationship of any sort. No hugging, no kissing, no whatever.
Again, this is spring of 2012. From then until this year, July of this year, when you reported this, did you have any other kind of intimate contact with him, any kind of sex of any sort after this assault, between that and the time that you reported this?
No sex.
No sex. You said no sex. I don't want to read into it, but somebody else could. What do you mean by that? Okay, there was no sex, but was there something else? Was there kissing or touching? Or?
As in, nothing physical.
These messages suggest otherwise. The complainant says we never dated, but Hassan clearly calls me her ex-boyfriend.
I asked her what happened because she was crying, and she told me that her ex-boyfriend Victor forced her to come with her. Like
in the telephone sting, I asked my ex-girlfriend if we were dating at the time.
Dating at the time?
No, I don't think so. I think that was the whole point of the conversation because we were considering like going into, trying it.
Both my ex-girlfriend and I heavily implied that we had a romantic relationship at some point in time in the telephone sting. And after talking to Detective DeCoster, she suddenly changes her mind and says that we didn't date. My lawyers and I plan to emphasize the gaping discrepancy between Hassan's and my ex-girlfriend's timeline. Hassan clearly states that this happened while I was a freshman at Virginia Tech. To note, I've never been to Virginia Tech, I've never attended Virginia Tech, and I've never been to the city of Blacksburg.
nothing funny would happen, and because he goes to Virginia Tech, and so he wasn't around as much.
While my ex-girlfriend clearly states that this happened in the spring of 2012 when I was a senior and she was a junior in high school.
So, your best guess would be in March of 2012.
Best guess, but it's a guess.
Again, this is spring of 2012.
I eventually arranged to take a polygraph test on my own and on my own bill. I passed with an indication of no deception detected, In other words, according to the analysis, there was a 0.001% chance of me lying. There was a lot more that we prepared, such as pictures that proved my relationship with my ex and other kinds of information that was relevant. And I want to point out what Detective DeCoster left out of the incident report. He made no mention of the complainant's borderline personality diagnosis. He didn't even bring up the fact that I brought it up. He didn't even say something along the lines of Victor lied or exaggerated about the complainant's mental state. He just skipped that part completely. He talked about a lot of other things, but he just completely left that detail out. He made no mention of the phone call to me on September 26th, or the phone call he made to me on the day of my arrest where he tried to intimidate me into a false confession. He also conveniently left out the fact that Hassan's and my ex-girlfriend's timeline deviate from each other by over a year. Also, according to my ex-girlfriend, she met Hassan at the end of 2012, several months after the March 1st to June 1st timeframe. I kept asking my lawyers this question: what are the chances that this might end at the preliminary hearing? It was something that I was praying for, something that I was hoping for. Their answer? Very slim. They explained that it doesn't take much to get past a preliminary hearing and then go on to a grand jury. And it doesn't take much for a grand jury to deem a case worth prosecuting and then go on to the trial phase. So I was a little bit disheartened, but determined to fight on. When we got to the Fairfax courthouse, it was really bizarre. The prosecutor finally had a chance to talk to my ex-girlfriend, which is actually pretty unusual. In many cases, the prosecutor, the witnesses, the complainant, the police generally work quite close together. It was even revealed that day that the prosecutor did try to get in touch with my ex-girlfriend before the day of the preliminary hearing, but was just unable to reach her. This actually caused me to worry because I was beginning to wonder if she would even show up. And if she doesn't show up, there's a chance that the case could have a continuance, which is essentially a delay, and that would just cause the case to go on further, and that would just keep me out of school even further and keep me from resuming my life for a longer period of time. Detective DeCoster was there as well. He actually passed by me and asked me how I was holding up. I told him that I was doing well, and I wished him luck with whatever he had to do that day. Even before the preliminary hearing began, in the hallways, my lawyers found Detective DeCoster and delivered the thousands of social media messages plus my polygraph report to DeCoster. Apparently, DeCoster took a look at a page or two of the messages, then completely lost interest in the case after seeing the information that dispels the story that he and my ex-girlfriend crafted. The prosecutor disclosed to us that day that my ex's story was no longer coherent. She began changing the year of when she was raped, and apparently she changed it more than once. She had trouble deciding if she was raped in 2012 or in 2013. My ex-girlfriend was probably, though I am not certain, confronted with the same information that DeCoster saw. My ex-girlfriend went on a tangent explaining that she's not sure what year this happened, she's not sure when it happened, and she's not even sure about the details anymore, but she insists that at some point at some time I pushed her on the ground and forced her to have sex with me. To clarify things, we aren't in the courtroom yet. We're still in the hallway, and I'm seated about 20 meters away from the conversation, so I heard most of it. Detective DeCoster, holding hundreds of text messages in his hands, spoke to my lawyers and said something along the lines of, "The families have been through a lot, and they also know each other. We just want everyone to move on." DeCoster and the prosecutor then turned around and went somewhere else. My lawyers came back to the table where I was sitting, and then said something to me that I will never forget for the rest of my life. "They're dropping the charges." The prosecutor decided to drop all charges against me, and this has been described to be a very rare conclusion for a preliminary hearing, as described by many legal professionals. The overwhelming majority of criminal cases end in some sort of plea bargain. To simplify it, a plea bargain or plea deal is when the defense and prosecution kind of meet in the middle or compromise. So the point of this is to avoid the lengthy and exhausting process of a trial, which is tiring for all parties. So for example, maybe the defense will settle for 5 years instead of 10 years, or they will settle for 20 years instead of life, something like that. In my case, it just ended there and then. There was no offer for a plea deal. And even if there was an offer of some sort of plea bargain, I would rather fight it to the very end than to give such a bargain an ounce of consideration. I remember when I heard that the charges were being dropped, when we wouldn't have to fight this in a court setting, I remember thinking, I can't believe this is finally over. It was as though a long siege has finally been lifted. It was as though I came back to life. I could finally go back to school. I could finally explain to my friends that I can come back to school. And I remember just running into the bathroom, and no one else was in the bathroom, and I was just crying like an idiot, just saying, I can't believe everything that's going on. I can't believe that I kind of went through this, and I think I was crying because of a mixture of happiness, relief, and I was also laughing. And I think a part of the reason is because of the dark humor of it all, if I can explain it like that. What I mean is that I was just still digesting the fact that the complainant and her friend were able to do this with that kind of story while changing the details. So I was still dealing with that. I still found it unbelievable and indigestible and impossible to comprehend. It was jarring in so many ways. This might sound odd, but I was looking forward to going into that courtroom. I was looking forward to sharing my side of the story, to sharing my evidence in front of a judge and prosecutor. I was looking forward to seeing my ex-girlfriend, to seeing Hassan get on that stand and expose themselves in front of a judge, a prosecutor, and a jury. Given that it was the preliminary hearing, it wasn't necessarily have unfolded like that, but nonetheless, I was mentally prepared to face this. So it almost felt odd that this ended earlier than anyone expected. Of course, that moment of internal celebration was also hit hard by the realities I had to face. I just lost a semester of school, and we'll have to make that up somehow. My family had to pay $60,000 in lawyer's fees. Even though I'm innocent, I'm still severely penalized because of a false accusation. And it wasn't even a cleverly crafted accusation. I don't think I have enough time or enough words to articulate how arduous this has been for me. From having your humanity stripped from you and dealing with the reality that there's a possibility you might never get out. I remember I was sitting in jail and wondering, will I ever get to see and feel grass again? I will never forget being handed that striped jumpsuit and being asked to strip in front of a guard and being told by prison staff that I might never get out. I will never forget what it felt like to potentially lose everything. My freedom, my education, my aspirations. Will I get to take those military history classes that you've been dying to take? Will I get to apply for internships and jobs and scholarships that I was planning to apply for? Will I get a chance to walk my dog again in the park near my house? Will I get a chance to feel free again? I don't think I can weave together the right words to describe how painful it was to see my family go through this with me. I will love them more and forever for staying by my side during my darkest hour, but at the same time, to see them in pain because of something that's happening to me is an indescribable despair that I will never forget. I was allowed to return to the University of Virginia as a student. The administrators there seemed somewhat surprised upon my return. The Dean of Students, Alan Groves, said that he was perplexed by the fact that the detective interviewed me in July, waited 3 months to arrest me, and then didn't have enough evidence to get past the preliminary hearing. Alan Groves was not the only professional who was confused by DeCoster's behavior. I've spoken to several professors, lawyers, and reporters who are all quite confused on why Detective DeCoster handled the case the way he did, both for the sake of my innocence and for the sake of saving himself some trouble. There was no rational reason or incentive, even from his perspective, to arrest me. The charges were not only dropped, but also expunged. Considering that it's the Commonwealth of Virginia and it's felony charges like rape and abduction, this is incredibly rare. Expungement means that the records are sealed and no one can access them. The fact that the Commonwealth of Virginia did not resist my appeal for expungement is very significant. I graduated from the University of Virginia on time, despite my lost semester. I was even somewhat able to graduate with a double major. Of course, that meant taking more classes than usual. I was blessed to have had the opportunity to study abroad on scholarships and to graduate Phi Beta Kappa. Upon graduation, I had an interesting career experience in China as a media personality and as a part-time English teacher. Regarding the whole false accusation episode, I published 3 different articles detailing my experience. In the articles, I focused more on how, at the university level, these universities can handle these accusations in a more even-handed manner. And I'm happy to have worked with the University of Virginia to amend their policies so that it will be more fair, more smooth, and more transparent for the next person or next couple people that might run into the same situation. I've never quite felt like I found the best way to tell my story, and I'm not sure the way I choose to tell my story now is the best way, but for my own closure and for hope of making a difference, I feel the need to share my story. When I share my story with lawyers, reporters, friends, they generally give me a lot of sympathy, but they also find details of my story very unbelievable. How could a detective be that stupid? Who would lie like that? Who would make a false accusation? I grappled with the conflict of whether or not I should share my story. Many people told me to move on, and many people even suggested that it's a story that shouldn't be shared. Many people recommended to me that I should pretend that this did not happen, and to find in my heart to forgive those that caused me so much harm. There was even a professor whom I spoke with, who told me to never publish my story because it would undermine the fight against sexual assault. But for my own closure and for hope of making a difference, I feel the need to share my story. I want to share my story to show that accusations in bad faith do happen. people do lie to the police for their own agenda. There are members of our police force that do not seem to have justice as their main priority. DeCoster had many opportunities to realize that this case had its problems, that the accusation had many inconsistencies and other problems, and at the very least know there was no way to bring it to trial. He never interviewed any of my friends or my family. He didn't have the common sense to ask for communications between me and my girlfriend. He never followed up on his challenge to give me a polygraph test, which I ended up having to take on my own initiative and out of my own pocket. And he seemed to have completely failed to cross-check Hassan's story with that of my false accuser. I don't know if Detective DeCoster is a bad cop, but the way he handled my investigation is rather alarming. It begs the question of, are most investigations handled this carelessly? Or is this an exception? Did DeCoster have his own personal agenda in vehemently pursuing me? If my family and I did not have the means to hire a private defense lawyer, would DeCoster and the prosecutor bully me into accepting a plea bargain? If I did not have my messages saved, which my ex did try to delete a few months before the accusation, would this have played out differently? It is disheartening to know that my ex-girlfriend and Hassan didn't really have to put that much time or effort to cause a huge disturbance in my life. Some people like to remind me that the system worked in my case because I was ultimately exonerated. I recognize that I'm fortunate that I wasn't falsely convicted, but at the same time, if the system truly worked, then why was I still penalized so heavily? Why did my family and I have to do the suffering, while the only thing that my ex-girlfriend Hassan had to give up was just some time doing their interviews with the police? They didn't lose any amount of freedom or have to pay any amount of fees. Why does it appear that there are no consequences for those that make malicious accusations, even when it's extremely obvious? You think about the notorious Duke Lacrosse case back in 2006 when Crystal Magnum falsely accused 3 Duke Lacrosse players of raping her. Even despite the fact that it was obviously a false accusation and the damages she caused not just to the 3 Duke Lacrosse players but also to the whole community, she was still just let go. And then she would go on to kill her boyfriend, I guess her ex-boyfriend, and then be convicted for a second-degree murder. You can think about the notorious Rolling Stone story, a rape on campus, where a woman who goes by the alias Jackie falsely accused a fraternity of gang raping her. There were no consequences for her either. So it's clear that I was able to get out of this and that for the most part I've been able to kind of recollect myself. But was there truly any justice? Will there ever be a day where I get called as a witness to testify about the crime that was committed against me? I have a large number of files from the discovery phase of Zheng vs. Commonwealth that I have kept. I'm also happy to substantiate anything that I've said in this video. If they are willing, I welcome Detective DeCoster, Hassan Karam, my false accuser, to provide a rebuttal to anything I have said or claimed. There was no official explanation given. What I have observed and what other people have shared with me is that if my ex-girlfriend was somehow charged, then the state, Detective DeCoster, the Commonwealth's attorney, would essentially have to say that they screwed up and would have to admit to some level of wrongdoing for that to happen. Would they ever do that? At least to me, it really seems like the Commonwealth and Detective DeCoster really didn't want a lot of noise about the miscarriage of justice regarding Zheng versus Commonwealth. For my false accuser, if I were to sue her, it'll be focused on acquiring her assets, not her family's assets. I did consult several lawyers in regards to a possible civil suit after Zheng vs. Commonwealth finished. As I suspected, every lawyer I talked to was not interested in taking the case. I was told that it would be easy to win a judgment against her and that proving my case in a civil court, remember it's not criminal court, it would be civil court, would be rather easy, but collecting the judgment would be a whole nother story. Especially since at the time she was also just a college student when she made the accusation. She doesn't have any assets of her own, so it's what could I get? Even if I earn $1 million judgment, I can't necessarily collect it from her. A lot of people will say, well, you could garnish her wages. But what they don't realize is that, as I've personally done through Google research and through consultation of lawyers, is that she can take advantage of many loopholes to avoid paying me. Also, money can't compensate for what happened to me. I'd much rather be called as a witness to testify against my false accuser for falsely accusing me of a heinous crime for her own personal agenda. That would bring me closure. That would be much more meaningful. But she, along with many other false accusers, will never be prosecuted. Regarding the police, in this case particularly DeCoster, the police have a lot of immunities. They are essentially impossible to sue, as I found out and as lawyers told me. DeCoster's defense was forecasted to be along the lines of, oh, he's overworked, he has a lot of cases, and that a lousy investigation doesn't mean that he had criminal intent to just ruin my life. Even though, looking at the facts, I personally think that he more likely than not knew I was innocent, but still pursued the case anyway. I don't think that he would admit to making a mistake or admit that he knew I was innocent and still arrested me anyway. I will continue to write and partake in whatever I can to contribute to the discussion. The dynamic of false accusations isn't just isolated to sexual assault. Women falsely accuse men, women have falsely accused other women, men have accused men, men have even falsely accused women of certain things. It's not a dynamic that is specific to one group of people or to one kind of crime. I did keep a journal and I did take notes just to keep a record of how I was feeling, and just in case the very worst happened, at least I had a reflection. At least there was something I could leave behind. I hope to publish a short narrative of everything that happened. It would be more detailed than this video, and will focus on how everything transpired and the emotions I experienced during this false accusation episode. There are many different studies and statistics that have varying conclusions on the frequency of false accusations. I am not here to debate or refute statistics. What matters to me is that it is clear that false accusations happen, and it is clear that it is easy to commit a false accusation to hurt someone and cause turmoil in a community. A crime may be relatively rare, such as murder or terrorism, but that doesn't make it any less important. Whether it's theft, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's false accusations, all crimes should be taken seriously, and the people who commit these crimes should be punished if enough evidence can be procured to prove that the crime happened beyond a reasonable doubt. I would emphasize, even a false accuser should only be penalized and punished if the crime can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. It is understandable that it is incredibly hard for people to come forward, especially victims of sexual assault. And that is why I'm definitely in favor of strong support systems for complainants, to have a system that makes it more comfortable and easier to make a complaint, while assuring that even if someone is accused of making a false charge or false claim, that they are also given due process and a chance to defend themselves. I can also put it this way. Because of how much I value due process and how much I value giving people a platform to tell their side of the story, even if my false accuser is somehow put on trial for the crime she committed against me, I would still wish her to have her due process, her chance and right to an attorney, and a chance to explain her side of the story in court in front of a judge and jury. Or she could take a plea bargain if she feels that that's more appropriate for her. These kinds of malicious false accusations impact everyone. People who make false accusations of rape trivialize the traumatic experiences of genuine victims of sexual assault, and at the same time cause so much dismay to the people being falsely accused and the community around them. If we want to take a look at this from a fiscal point of view, people who make false accusations waste and hog up a lot of limited resources. They take the limited time of prosecutors, investigators, deputies, judges, anyone working in the court systems, including court interpreters and so forth. So essentially, whenever a false accusation is made and pursued, the state is essentially using our tax money to penalize the innocent. None of this is cheap. And what I think should offend everyone is that while DeCoster was so adamant in pursuing me, he probably ignored countless genuine victims of rape and sexual assault, while ignoring actual perpetrators of this heinous crime. These are resources that need to be used on the right people. The criminal justice system shouldn't be used as a tool to achieve personal vendettas or revenge. I want to emphasize that rape, sexual assault, in any kind of manifestation is a horrible crime that must be punished severely. But at the same time, we must make sure that the innocent are not penalized along with the guilty. The challenges of the victims of sexual assault and false accusations are not mutually exclusive. It's not as though if you support one, you're against the other. You can support both victims of sexual assault and false accusations. All in all, this is not about the challenges of any one victim. This is about understanding the reality of the systems available and maintaining an attitude that is supportive to victims on all sides of the equation. This may have been the most arduous period of my life, but I have faith that my experience can provide insight on how to handle these kinds of accusations, on how to carefully pursue these kinds of allegations, and how to frame response policies in an even-handed manner that provides fairness for all. To conclude this, I want to thank you for listening to my story, and I hope that this has some meaning and will be able to make a difference, even if just the slightest.